What do you mean the ACC GT4 feels numb? How many pairs of gloves do I need to order? How much fuel does a GT3 or GT4 car take? How do you tell when the car is understeering? Are the brake and throttle on a race car stiffer or lighter than the road car? There have been so many great questions on this YouTube channel, so we took the time to dig through some of the most recent comments, and I'm going to be answering them today. If you guys want any question answered, be sure to ask them either down below or on any other video on the channel. If we find them interesting, we'll pull them off, and we're going to make another video in the future with some of your questions. Let's start answering these ones. What do you mean the ACC GT4 feels numb? Are you talking about purely FFB, the physical feeling in your hands, the way the car reacts to setup changes, the way the car drives and changes balance, the way the car behaves during slip angle? Numb can be interpreted in many different ways. Your answer is extremely non-descriptive. Well, it doesn't need a lot of description because it's so far away from what the actual car feels like. You don't need to write a thesis to figure out why it's so far away. But just to answer those few questions, the FFB in general on ACC is a little flawed. You have this weird wobbling effect, which you cannot get out. I've asked many people that are experienced in ACC. That's something that you cannot get out of the game for some strange reason. I don't know why that is. Setup changes, I haven't gotten into setup changes, but I've taken professional setups. I've used the default, the aggressive, I've used esports setups. They all feel numb. And what I mean by numb is the car literally feels like you're driving a sponge, like a wet, soggy sponge. It doesn't react to what you're doing. What I'm asking from the car doesn't line up with what actually should be happening. So it's just the steering is too slow, the weight transfer is too slow, it's sloppy, it's very slow to transition weight. It's just so far off. I don't know how many more ways I can describe how far away it is. I guess if you're looking at GT3, some people say it's good. Some drivers will say it's good just because you can drive it a lot more aggressively. But I feel like the reason I don't drive the GT3 or GT4 is because the braking is way too aggressive in the sense that you hammer the brakes down and the timing of holding the brake pedal down is way longer than you would have it held down in real life. And for that reason, I don't play ACC. It's not because it's not fun. It's a fun game. It can be very fun, but we're talking simulator. That's what we're talking about. It's not simulating what I'm feeling in the real car, so I don't want to use it because I don't want to develop those bad habits. It's close enough to where you can start developing those bad habits, but still so far away in terms of technique that you have to use that it's kind of in that weird spot where it can almost produce really bad habits, and you don't want that. How many pairs of gloves do I need to order to get an invite next year? So that's referring to our Houston trip where we took 16 sim racers and put them in the real GT4 car. The funny answer is 1,000 pairs, but the real answer is it's not really an open event. It's an event designed for the Morainus M Squad, which is our team. It's a team where we hand select drivers. It's like we'll reach out to you, you don't reach out to us kind of deal. Made up of people that we have familiarity with. So we've done coaching, friends of friends, friends of teammates. It's an exclusive club and we want to keep that integrity intact and the culture of our team. So if you're a good member of the community and you're very positive and you're super involved, there's a chance that we get in touch with you and you have the opportunity to sign up as a member of our Morainus M Squad and get the chance maybe in the future to drive a real race car. How much fuel does a GT3 or GT4 car take? That's a pretty open question because the GT4 in IMSA BOP, balance of performance, can take between 75 to 80 liters, and the GT3 is around like 100 to 110, let's say, liters. But every car is different. All the fuel burns different, so every engine burns at a different rate. So essentially, the cars are always balanced in a way where it's on time. So every car should be able to do about 55 minutes to an hour if they're full push. and that's in GT3. And on GT4 cars, it's around 50 minutes to 55 minutes. If you're fuel saving, you can go a little bit longer, but you obviously trade off performance for the fuel save. But yeah, every car is a little different, but it's definitely up there. It's in the 70 to 100, 110 range, depending on the car and the fuel burn. Hey Daniel, IRL, how do you tell when the car is understeering? Do you feel it through the wheel or body? Because in iRacing, I can barely feel any understeer effect on the wheel. So I'm wondering if that's realistic. I would say that it's a combination of the two. You definitely feel it through your hands. You feel a lack of the weight comes off the wheel. So that load comes out of the front tire and there's just less resistance on the steering. So it's easier to turn it back and forth or to add more. The tendency is always to add more wheel angle in real life, but it's the worst thing you can do because it just makes the front tire slide more. So it's something that actually simulator games have helped me, let's say, mitigate that tendency or that technique in real life to stop turning the wheel. When I feel the understeer, instead of just adding more rotation on the wheel, I actually use the brake or throttle a little bit more to work the car, to work the differential, to work the weight distribution. But yeah, it's also in the body as well. You can feel the lack of G. It's just both. It's really both. It's hard to ever replicate that through a motion sim. A lot of the stuff you feel in terms of understeer is through your steering. So I would say try to focus on getting better force feedback settings. If you look at things like static force reduction, that's something that will help you feel the understeer a little bit easier in sim if you have that option in your force feedback settings. I know SimuCube offers that. So the easiest thing you can do is probably just apply my SimuCube profile if you have it, and you should be able to feel the understeer no problem. Hey Daniel, love the video. Are the brake and throttle on a race car stiffer or lighter than the road car? Like how much? I want to set up my cute Logitech G29 pedal as close as it can be to the real car, but I don't have access to the real car. I mean, you're never gonna, unfortunately, be able to get a Logitech G29 pedal to feel like a real car. I know there's some upgrade kits and some sponges and rubbers and things you can do to the Logitech G29, but if you're going to spend all that time to upgrade your G29 pedal, you might as well save up and put that towards a load cell pedal, which is going to feel a lot more like the real car, because the real race car throttle and brake are a lot stiffer than the G29. There's more resistance and it is much stiffer than a road car. Does SRO allow tire warmers? I know that in Europe and the American Championship were allowed tire warmers. I'm not sure about the rest of the series around the world, so like Australia or in Asia, but at least for America, we were using tire warmers, and it's so different compared to using non-tire warmer prep tires, because you basically leave the pit lane and it's immediately there. The tire has so much grip. Even on a new tire, you're like on it straight away. Within the first 3 corners, you're already full push. So there is a technique and a very specific way you bring the tire in to make it last, but I don't know what I prefer more. I think I prefer no tire warmers, because there's a more opportunity when the tires are cold to make a big difference on the outlaps. So yeah, tire warmers are cool because you can basically push right away and it feels like you're on a rail, but having no tire warmers is really nice because it's challenging, it's tricky. You have to really be on top of it, almost like driving in the rain for that first lap or even lap and a half. What about a 49-inch curve monitor instead of 3? Well, that's a good one. That's a good question, but I've always preferred 3 screens over a single ultra wide or a super ultra wide, because, and more so the 49-inch, because of the vertical real estate. Not so much the horizontal. I think it's the vertical real estate that I'm missing. You just don't get a lot of the screen. It feels very squished. I think that the perfect racing monitor would be the equivalent of 3 screens, but in a 16:9 aspect ratio. That would be insane. If you had a 16:9 aspect ratio, 1000R curve, full wraparound, basically to 90 degrees on both sides of you, that would be insane. And yeah, first person who makes that monitor, it's a game over for sim racing. I think it'll probably be expensive, but I would get it. So you are saying stick to iRacing. I love iRacing, but I feel like it's due for a real upgrade. If you want a realistic experience and you want something that's going to help you connect to the real car as best as possible, iRacing is the sim for you, just because of how good the braking is. Forget about everything else. The braking is what dictates you being comfortable in a race car or not. And getting the timing of the braking and everything like that is what iRacing does very, very well. Obviously, it needs an upgrade. It's a little bit of an older game, but regardless of all that stuff, it's still the best option we have. And the game or the sim I prefer to use over anything else. And it's not because anybody's paying me, because nobody's paying me to drive or to play games. I'm doing it purely out of enjoyment because I like it. It's just the one I choose because it's good. You mentioned lack of tire realism and fall off during a stint. Have you ever tried iRacing endurance events? I have driven many endurance events in iRacing, even running up to 5 stints on a set of tires, and I just feel like there's not enough drop off in terms of the grip level on iRacing. Normally in real life, we have a really big drop off in performance, depending on the track as well. Some tracks are different than others, but the more abrasive the track is, the more tire deg or tire wear we get. But usually there's a big change in balance over a run, so it could feel a little bit pushy or understeery in the beginning of a stint, and then by the end of a stint, the rears might go off. So I would like to see that changed in the future. You definitely see lap times being, let's say, stable or progressing in one direction, whether getting quicker or slower depending on the track and the tire wear. That's purely based on fuel. So I'd like to see more fuel burn effect come into play, and also more tire wear come into effect, where the balance changes and the driving technique changes throughout a stint. Let's wrap up the questions with this final one about finishing a race or winning at all costs. So the question is just a quick question about racing competitively. Which is a good rule to go by? Finish the race or win at all costs? So that's a great question, and it's obviously situationally dependent. It all depends what you're doing, what position you are on the track, what position you are in the championship, what kind of race is it. I think that if you're playing for points, you always want to collect the points because points make prizes. And if you're going for iRating or some sort of point system, towards a championship, you want to finish races. It's no good to finish first in 3 races and then not finish the 4th race. So you always want to take what you can get, unless it's a do or die situation and you need to make it happen. Obviously, you're not going out there intentionally wrecking people, but you have to drive within the parameters that are presented to you, essentially. So I always have that in mind. Risk management is always at the forefront, and you always have to assess the situation you're in before you make the move in the race. I hope you guys enjoyed me answering those questions. Those were some great questions. If you have, like I said, any other questions, make sure you ask them either down below in this video or in a past or future video. I really enjoy these kinds of videos. I love answering your questions and answering the tough ones as well. And if you haven't already subbed, make sure to do so. If you've made it to this point in the video, you most likely are a sub, but if you aren't and you enjoyed it, make sure you sub to the channel and like the video if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next one.